March 21, 1980. A shotgun blast echoes through South Philadelphia. Angelo Bruno, the man who kept peace in Philadelphia's underworld for 21 years, slumps forward in his car. His driver sits frozen, wounded but alive. That single gunshot unleashed 15 years of violence. Over 30 mob members dead, families destroyed, a city transformed into a battleground. This is the story of how one murder triggered the bloodiest mob war in American history. And the shocking part, most of the key players are still alive today. For 21 years, Angelo Bruno controlled Philadelphia's organized crime without the constant violence that plagued other cities. Born in Sicily in 1910, Bruno emigrated to America as a child and built an empire through gambling, loan sharking, and labor racketeering. Law enforcement called him the docile Don because he preferred negotiation over assassination. Bruno lived modestly in a South Philadelphia row house with his wife Sue, his childhood sweetheart. While other mob bosses flaunted their wealth, Bruno operated legitimate businesses including an extermination company and maintained a low profile. His approach worked. He avoided lengthy prison terms despite numerous arrests. But Bruno's peaceful reign masked growing tensions. He publicly banned drug trafficking while other crime families earned millions from narcotics. What his lieutenants didn't fully understand was Bruno's double standard. He was allegedly allowing certain New York associates to operate drug networks in South Jersey, territory under his control. On March 21, 1980, the 69-year-old Bruno enjoyed dinner at his favorite Italian restaurant. Around 10 p.m., his associate John Stanfa drove him home to 934 Snyder Avenue. As Bruno sat in the passenger seat smoking a cigarette, a figure emerged from the shadows. One shotgun blast to the head ended Bruno's life instantly. 21 years of peace died with him. Antonio Caponigro, known as Tony Bananas, had been Bruno's consigliere, his most trusted advisor. Federal authorities and court testimony later revealed that Caponigro had orchestrated Bruno's murder, believing he could seize control of the Philadelphia family and expand into the lucrative drug trade. Caponigro made a fatal miscalculation. In La Cosa Nostra, there's one absolute rule. You never kill a boss without approval from the Commission, the governing body of New York's 5 families. According to court records and law enforcement reports, Caponigro had allegedly sought permission from New York's Genovese family, but the Commission hadn't sanctioned the hit. 3 weeks after Bruno's murder, authorities discovered Caponigro's body in the trunk of a car in the Bronx. According to court testimony from mob informants, he had been tortured. His mouth reportedly contained dollar bills, a message about greed. Federal investigators documented similar fates for other conspirators, including Frank Sindone and John Simone. The Commission's response was clear. Unauthorized murders of bosses would not be tolerated. But the message came too late. Bruno's assassination had already shattered 2 decades of stability. Every ambitious mobster in Philadelphia saw an opening. The question wasn't whether more violence would follow, it was how much blood would spill before order returned. Philip Testa never sought the spotlight. The 56-year-old mobster earned his nickname, the Chicken Man, from his legitimate poultry business, though some said it came from scars on his face, reportedly from a severe case of chickenpox in his youth. Unlike many mobsters, Testa remained devoted to his wife Ulfia and their 2 children, avoided excessive drinking, and maintained traditional values. With Bruno dead and Caponigro executed, the Commission needed someone to restore order in Philadelphia. They chose Testa. He was old school, respected by traditional mobsters, and connected to powerful New York families through decades of criminal enterprise. Testa attempted to stabilize the situation. In June 1980, he inducted several new members into the crime family. However, he made what some viewed as a critical error. He passed over Frank Narducci, a significant earner who'd been waiting years for formal membership. According to later court testimony, this slight festered into resentment. Meanwhile, Testa's underboss Peter Casella was allegedly building a drug network, the very activity Bruno had officially forbidden. When Testa discovered this and attempted to shut it down, according to federal prosecutors, Casella began plotting against him. In February 1981, federal prosecutors indicted Testa and 9 others on racketeering charges. The pressure was mounting from all sides. March 15, 1981, exactly 1 year after Angelo Bruno's assassination, Philip Testa returned home around 3 a.m. after conducting business at his restaurant. His son Joseph had dropped him off at 2117 Porter Street, directly across from Stephen Gerrard Park. Testa walked toward his front door. The explosion was heard 10 blocks away. According to police reports, a nail bomb packed with explosives had been planted beneath his front porch. The blast created a 30-inch crater through 6 inches of concrete. The porch roof collapsed. The front door was blown 15 feet into the house. Bricks and debris scattered across the street into the park. Windows shattered for blocks. Officers arriving at the scene found Testa critically injured on the far side of the crater. According to news reports from the scene, one officer described his injuries as devastating. Assistant medical examiner Halbert Fillinger officially reported Testa died from multiple injuries to his head, trunk, arms, and legs. He was pronounced dead at St. Agnes Medical Center at 4:15 a.m. Police recovered nearly $79,000 from around his body and inside his home. Bruce Springsteen later memorialized the bombing in his 1982 song, Atlantic City. "Well, they blew up the Chicken Man in Philly last night." Nicodemo, Little Nicky Scarfo stood just 5'5", but court records document his history of violence. Years earlier, he'd been convicted of manslaughter for stabbing a longshoreman during an altercation at a diner. Angelo Bruno had essentially banished him to Atlantic City, viewing him as too violent and unpredictable. Now, with Testa dead, the commission appointed Scarfo as Philadelphia's new boss. If Bruno represented peace through negotiation, Scarfo represented the opposite. Federal prosecutors would later document that under Scarfo's leadership, the Philadelphia family transformed from one of America's most stable crime organizations into one of its most violent. Court testimony from multiple mob informants revealed that bodies began appearing regularly throughout the early 1980s. Scarfo's first documented targets were those involved in Testa's murder. According to trial testimony, Frank Narducci, the capo who allegedly helped orchestrate the bombing, was shot and killed on January 7, 1982. Rocco Marinucci, identified by prosecutors as the man who planted the bomb under Testa's porch, was found dead on March 15, 1982, exactly 1 year after the bombing. According to news reports, his body was discovered beaten and shot in a South Philadelphia parking lot with firecrackers in his mouth, a symbolic reference to the bomb. Scarfo's reign of violence had only just begun. Salvatore Testa was 28 years old when his father died in the nail bomb explosion. According to court testimony from mob informants who later cooperated with federal authorities, the younger Testa swore vengeance and participated in carrying out retribution against those responsible, including ensuring Frank Narducci knew who was executing him. Scarfo promoted Salvatore, using him as an enforcer, but success in mob life often breeds suspicion. Court testimony revealed that Salvatore became too popular, too competent, and too visible. His relationship with the daughter of Salvatore, Chucky Merlino, whose son Joey was already creating problems for Scarfo, added to the tension. On September 14, 1984, according to federal prosecutors' accounts, Salvatore Testa was lured to a meeting under false pretenses. His closest associates turned on him. He was shot multiple times in the head and back, then his body was buried in a shallow grave in South Jersey. When investigators discovered the grave months later, they found something poignant in his pockets, his mother's phone number and a religious medal. According to court testimony, the Chicken Man's son never knew his friends had betrayed him until the moment they pulled their guns. The mob war had claimed perhaps its most tragic victim, a son seeking to avenge his father's murder. By 1986, South Philadelphia had witnessed numerous mob-related homicides. Federal prosecutors were building RICO cases, using the Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act to target entire criminal enterprises rather than individual crimes. But they needed evidence of ongoing criminal conspiracy. The FBI knew Scarfo conducted business in his attorney Salvatore Avina's office. Normally, attorney-client privilege would protect those conversations. However, prosecutors argued, and a federal judge agreed, that if the attorney's office was being used as a base for planning ongoing criminal activity, the privilege didn't apply. The court authorized electronic surveillance of the office. For 2 years, FBI agents monitored conversations from a post in the federal courthouse basement, just 1 block away from Avina's office. They recorded over 2,000 conversations. Federal court documents later revealed that whenever Scarfo met with his associates, the FBI was listening. In one recorded conversation introduced at trial, Scarfo complained about the quality of Philadelphia mobsters. In another conversation that became part of the court record, Avina told Scarfo's consigliere he'd paid $500 to have his office swept for electronic surveillance devices, unaware the FBI was recording that very conversation. The tapes provided federal prosecutors with unprecedented evidence of ongoing criminal conspiracy, racketeering, and extortion. John Stanfa, Bruno's driver who survived the 1980 assassination, had been deported to Sicily afterward, suspected by authorities of involvement in the murder plot. By 1990, Scarfo was serving multiple life sentences in federal prison, convicted on numerous RICO charges. The Philadelphia family was in disarray. The commission looked to Sicily and brought Stanfa back to America to restore order. The Sicilian-born mobster was traditional, formal, and emphasized old-world values of honor and respect. He conducted much of his business in Italian. The commission believed his traditional approach might stabilize the organization. They miscalculated. A young South Philadelphia mobster named Joseph "Skinny Joey" Merlino had other plans. According to federal prosecutors' later accounts, Merlino was everything Stanfa opposed: brash, American-born, media-savvy, and unwilling to defer to traditional hierarchies. While in prison, according to court testimony, Merlino had befriended Ralph Nadel, and together they'd plotted to eventually take control of Philadelphia's organized crime operations once released. Merlino didn't recognize the Five Family's authority to appoint Stanfa. He didn't care about Sicilian traditions. Court documents would later reveal that Merlino and his crew, dubbed the Young Turks by the press, wanted power on their own terms. They were willing to fight for it. The bloodiest phase of Philadelphia's mob war was beginning. This war is about to escalate to levels that shocked even federal investigators. If you're finding this story as compelling as the actual court testimony and FBI reports I've researched, hit that subscribe button, because what happens next involves sophisticated assassination attempts and ultimately brings down both sides of this conflict. January 31, 1992 marked the first mob-related homicide in Philadelphia in 7 years. Felix Bicchino, a Stanfa associate, was shot and killed in South Philadelphia. According to police reports, the shooter walked up calmly, fired multiple shots, then walked away. Federal prosecutors would later attribute this to the Merlino faction. Stanfa responded with violence. On March 3, 1992, according to court testimony, 2 shotgun-wielding attackers ambushed Mikey Chang Ciancaglini as he returned home. Ciancaglini survived by diving inside his house. In September 1992, attempting reconciliation, Stanfa inducted both Merlino and Ciancaglini as made members of the crime family. But the peace didn't last. Court testimony revealed that Michael Ciancaglini had recognized one of his attackers, his own brother Joseph, who was Stanfa's underboss. Exactly 1 year after the first attack, March 3, 1993, according to federal prosecutors' case files, 4 gunmen burst into Joseph Ciancaglini's restaurant and shot him repeatedly in the head. Joseph survived but suffered severe brain damage and never recovered. Federal court documents documented that the mob war had devolved into fratricide, brothers attacking brothers. Stanfa's attempts at reconciliation had failed spectacularly. From his office, according to FBI surveillance tapes introduced at trial, Stanfa began planning more aggressive retaliation. August 5, 1993. According to court records and eyewitness testimony, Joey Merlino and Michael Ciancaglini were walking on a South Philadelphia street when a van pulled up. Gunmen opened fire with automatic weapons. Michael Ciancaglini was killed instantly. Merlino was shot 4 times but survived, making it to a nearby hospital. FBI surveillance tapes later played at trial captured Stanfa soldier John Gotti discussing the attack. The only problem, according to the recordings, Merlino had survived. In mob culture, survivors often become legendary figures. 3 weeks later. On August 31, according to federal prosecutors' accounts, Stanfa and his son Joseph were driving on the Schuylkill Expressway when a white van with makeshift gun ports pulled alongside them. Assault rifles appeared and opened fire. Stanfa's driver maneuvered the van off the road while bullets tore through their car. Joseph Stanfa was hit but survived. Court documents note this was an extraordinary escalation, attempting to kill a sitting mob boss in broad daylight on a major highway. FBI agents listening to surveillance tapes heard Stanfa's rage and his plans for revenge. Federal prosecutors knew they had to act before more people died. The wiretap evidence was providing them with everything they needed for RICO prosecutions. John Gotti was one of Stanfa's most active soldiers. According to court testimony, he'd participated in the Ciancaglini shooting and killed Frank Baldino outside the Melrose Diner, a bartender friendly with Merlino's crew. Gotti had been deeply involved in the mob war's violence. But court records show Gotti began having doubts. He complained to Stanfa about not receiving adequate compensation. Stanfa grew suspicious. Then Gotti heard disturbing rumors. Stanfa had allegedly ordered his execution. On January 14, 1994, according to Gotti's later testimony, he was lured to a second-floor apartment. He immediately noticed something wrong. The entire room was covered in plastic sheeting. "We're painting," the men said. Moments later, they opened fire. Gotti was shot 3 times in the head and once in the chest. Incredibly, Gotti survived. He fought his way out of the apartment. At the hospital, FBI agents made him an offer: testify against Stanfa in exchange for witness protection. Gotti agreed to cooperate. Federal prosecutors now had their star witness, someone who'd been present at planning sessions, participated in violent acts, and could provide detailed testimony about the organization's structure and operations. Court documents show Gotti's testimony would prove devastating to Stanfa's defense. March 16, 1994. FBI agents executed coordinated raids across Philadelphia and South Jersey. John Stanfa was arrested along with 23 associates. The federal indictments listed charges including racketeering, extortion, loan sharking, murder, attempted murder, and conspiracy. The evidence prosecutors presented at trial was overwhelming. FBI surveillance tapes captured Stanfa openly discussing La Cosa Nostra operations and planning violent acts. On one recording played in court, Stanfa and his attorney Salvatore mocked Merlino and his crew, with Avina saying dismissively that even on a high mountain, certain people remain insignificant. Another tape presented at trial captured Stanfa discussing in broken English how to execute multiple targets simultaneously, emphasizing not giving anyone a chance to defend themselves. But court testimony revealed Stanfa allegedly ordered one final act of violence even from jail. On October 5, 1995, the day John Gotti was scheduled to testify, Gotti's brother William was shot and killed. Federal prosecutors argued this was meant to intimidate Gotti and send a message to potential cooperators. The strategy backfired. The jury heard the evidence, including Gotti's testimony despite the threats. According to court records, Stanfa was convicted on all major charges in November 1995. The judge sentenced him to life in federal prison without possibility of parole. With Stanfa imprisoned for life, Joey Merlino seized control of what remained of Philadelphia's organized crime operations. By 1999, at 37 years old, federal authorities identified Merlino as the acting boss of the Philadelphia family. He'd survived multiple assassination attempts and outlasted his rivals. But Merlino operated differently than his predecessors. Rather than maintaining a low profile, he embraced public attention. He frequented high-end restaurants and clubs, wore expensive designer suits, and appeared regularly in tabloid photographs. The press dubbed him the John Gotti of Passyunk Avenue, referencing both South Philadelphia's Main Street and New York's flamboyant former mob boss. Merlino seemed to view his status as something to celebrate rather than hide. He became a local celebrity of sorts, with admirers and critics alike fascinated by his brazen approach to criminal life. However, federal prosecutors were building another case. Court records show that Ralph Nadel, Merlino's former prison associate who'd helped him plot against Stanfa, was facing life imprisonment. In 1999, Nadel made an unprecedented decision that shocked the criminal underworld. According to federal prosecutors, he became the first sitting American mob boss to cooperate with authorities as a government witness. He agreed to wear a wire and record conversations with Merlino and other associates. The trial began in 2001. Ralph Nadel testified extensively about racketeering activities, extortion operations, illegal gambling networks, and the organizational structure of Philadelphia's crime family. According to court transcripts, federal prosecutors presented months of recorded conversations and corroborating evidence from multiple cooperating witnesses. In 2001, according to federal court records, Merlino and several top associates were convicted on RICO charges including racketeering, illegal gambling, and extortion. The judge sentenced Merlino to 14 years in federal prison. The young Turks who'd survived the bloody mob war were finally going down, not in shootouts, but in federal courtrooms. Merlino served 12 years before his release in 2011. Upon release, Merlino insisted his organized crime days were over. He divided his time between South Florida and Philadelphia. He launched a podcast called The Skinny with Joey Merlino and opened a cheesesteak restaurant on South Broad Street called Skinny Joey's Cheesesteaks. According to news reports, the restaurant was targeted with Molotov cocktails before opening, evidence that old resentments persist in South Philadelphia. However, it eventually opened and continues operating today, with positive customer reviews online. In 2024, media reports indicated Merlino had been shelved, essentially removed from the organization, for becoming too public with his media appearances. Today, John Stanfa, now 84 years old, remains incarcerated in federal prison in Connecticut, serving multiple life sentences. According to Bureau of Prisons records, he will never be eligible for release. The man who drove Angelo Bruno to his death in 1980 became the central figure in the mob war's second act. Joey Merlino, now 63, operates his cheesesteak restaurant and records his podcast, maintaining his public profile despite multiple felony convictions. He continues living in South Philadelphia, the neighborhood where dozens died during the conflicts he participated in. The Philadelphia crime family still exists, but federal law enforcement assessments indicate it's significantly diminished. Between the wars, the informants, and the federal prosecutions documented over 3 decades, the organization that once controlled multi-state criminal operations has been reduced to a fraction of its former strength. The violence has largely ended, but the memories persist. Walking through South Philadelphia today, you pass locations where Angelo Bruno was shot, where Philip Testa's home was destroyed, where numerous others died in mob-related violence. Local residents still remember the era when organized crime dominated headlines. The blood has washed away. The court cases have concluded, but Philadelphia hasn't forgotten the war that tore through its streets for nearly 2 decades. Between Angelo Bruno's murder in 1980 and the final convictions in the late 1990s, Philadelphia's mob war resulted in over 30 documented homicides according to federal prosecutors' filings and law enforcement records. Bosses, soldiers, and associates died violently. Brothers betrayed brothers. Fathers died while sons watched. Close friends became executioners. The war decimated the Philadelphia crime family, once considered one of America's most powerful organized crime organizations. Federal prosecutors' use of RICO statutes, electronic surveillance, and cooperating witnesses revolutionized how authorities combat organized crime. The FBI's wiretapping operation in attorney Salvatore Avina's office, approved by federal judges, became a template for future investigations nationwide. What began with one shotgun blast outside Angelo Bruno's home in 1980 didn't truly end until the late 1990s, nearly 2 decades of violence, prosecutions, and betrayals. Most of the major figures are documented in public court records. Stanfa remains imprisoned. Merlino operates legitimately, by his account. Countless others died or served lengthy prison sentences. The Philadelphia mob war stands as one of the most thoroughly documented periods of American organized crime history, with thousands of pages of court transcripts, FBI surveillance recordings, and cooperating witness testimony providing an unprecedented look inside La Cosa Nostra. This is the Mafia war that still haunts Philadelphia. If this deep dive into documented mob history was as fascinating for you as it was for me to research from court records and FBI files, please hit that like button. Drop a comment telling me which aspect of this story you found most interesting: the nail bomb, the FBI wiretaps, or Merlino's transformation into a restaurateur. Subscribe so you never miss when I cover another extensively documented true crime case. Thanks for watching, and remember, every event described here is documented in court records, federal prosecutions, and credible news sources.